Welcome back, virtual circuit riders. When we left off last time, we had observed the formation of the Northern and Southern Methodist churches, known as the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Methodist Episcopal Church South. From 1845 until the Civil War in 1861, a number of important developments happened in the South. The South had to learn how to live into its own identity by the formation of its new bishops. Bishop J.O. Andrew was the first, along with others that were named from the Southern churches. Joshua Soule being the strong constitutionalist that came to the South, and of course Southern Methodists from 1845 to 1861, before the Civil War, were arrayed along a continuum of ideas, not merely pro-slavery, but more pro-states' rights and regional rights. And of course, the church had to learn and build its institutions, which it did from 1845 to 1861. The Northern Church, it should be said, was not strong on the emancipation of the slave. The Conference of 1860 finally belatedly took a stand against slavery on a national front. So it was really not until the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, January, that the Northern Church finally came on record as being strong. So their prophetic witness was not as strong, the Northern Church, as, say, the Wesleyan connection, which we looked at the last time. So there was good and bad and ugly on all the different fronts of the Northern and Southern Church. As the war began, the War Department issued an order in 1861 to provide for regimental level chaplains for the Union Army. And so the Methodist Episcopal Church, as the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, obviously provided chaplains. And you can see here these chaplains at the regimental level began to distribute tracts, Bibles, and general ministry for the Union Army. The total number of Methodist chaplains that served the Union armies, according to William Warren Sweet and his seminal work on the Civil War and Methodism, could be well over 500. There were 50 conferences in the Northern Church in 1861, and there were 2,700 plus preachers, and so the vast bulk of these MEC pastors really enlisted as chaplains, and mostly from the New England and Mid-Atlantic states. You can see here in my book the breakdown, according to William Warren Sweet's statistics, of the various conferences of the Northern Church and the number of chaplains. And so with more than 500 regimental chaplains, which was a wonderful opportunity, the U.S. government paid upwards to $3,000 a year for Union chaplaincy, which was a great improvement, and many unscrupulous pastors tried to inveigle themselves into work with the Union Army. But nonetheless, over 500 U.S. Army chaplains came from the Methodist Episcopal Church South, which is about twice the number that served in the Confederate Army. The Southern Methodist Church provided about half the number of the U.S. Army chaplains, about 240. Another 140, of the Methodist Episcopal Church South pastors enlisted and fought as officers themselves. So you can see There were 1,500 plus MEC South pastors at the time. About 240 enlisted in the Confederate Army as chaplains, and another went in as officers, about 140. So you could see there was more of a desire to serve as combatants among the South. The Methodist Episcopal Church of the North also sent considerable numbers to serve in the U.S. Christian Commission, which was a tract and aid society that was run by Edmund James, this bishop here of the Northern Church, and provided care for the thousands of wounded and needy soldiers through tracts and first aid as well. So, as you can see here, the Methodist Episcopal Church of the North worked through the U.S. Christian Commission, which we saw was an aid organization, and as strong regimental chaplains. The Southern Methodists also spread revivals and Bibles through tracts, although they did not have access to the number of tracts that the North did. The printing presses did not provide as many Bibles for the Southern troops through the Confederate chaplains. It was difficult to get most Northern publishing of tracts and Bibles to the South, although T.O. Summers of the Southern Methodist Church in Nashville found ways to smuggle in plates of Bibles and tracts and move them. As Nashville came under federal control in February of 1862, destroying basically or employing the Methodist Episcopal Church South publishing house as a government printing office. Somehow Summers managed to smuggle New Testament publishing plates and tracts down to Augusta, and the MECS was able to spread through preaching and these smaller number of tracts to the soldiers, both in camps and in the front line. So the Methodist Episcopal Church of the North effectively becomes a division of the Union Army from the regimental chaplains. Ulysses S. Grant, his hymnal here, his Methodist hymnal with his own name. His wife was a strong Methodist in Galena, Illinois, but Ulysses S. Grant enlisted what he thought was the third party of American politics, the Methodist Church. There was Democrat, Republican, and Methodist, and over 300,000 Methodist soldiers served in the million-man standing Union Army. As we've said, 500 Army chaplains for the Methodist Church. Another 458 served in the U.S. Christian Commission. A man named Bishop Ames had been authorized by Secretary of War William Stanton to accompany the Northern Church and to, under orders from Lincoln, to occupy any Methodist Episcopal Church South churches that did not have a duly appointed pastor, to create civil order there. And Edwin M. Stanton, who was Lincoln's Secretary of War, had appointed Edward Ames, an Indiana regiment chaplain and a bishop, to absorb abandoned Southern Methodist churches. Edward Ames then becomes, as it were, a general under Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, and as the Union armies colonized and took over the South, Edward Ames went beyond the letter of the law and occupied most Methodist Episcopal Church South churches, aggravating relationships with the Southern Methodists and really closing off options for reconciliation after the war. Edward Ames, as it were, took aim upon the Southern Church and used the power of the Union Army to ecclesiastically colonize the South and to appoint his preachers. When Lincoln got word that Ames and other denominations too, not just the Methodists but the Presbyterians and other denominations were simply occupying other churches, Lincoln clarified the order and said that it was only churches without pastors that were to be occupied for the sake of creating order. The Methodist Episcopal Church during the period becomes a national church, and this man here, Matthew Simpson, becomes the chaplain to Lincoln, giving him emotional support and spiritual encouragement during the war. So the Methodist Episcopal Church becomes sort of the national chaplain to the Union Army's work, and Matthew Simpson emerges as Northern Methodism's singular leader, able to leverage the growing wealthy urban northern industrial class of Methodists to not only support the war but also to financially support Western expansion and international missionary expansion as well. Matthew Simpson ultimately becomes friend and the eulogizer of Lincoln himself. So Matthew Simpson grows to prominence, and the Northern Church is not destroyed as much as the Southern Church through the Civil War, and the Northern Church expanded into the South, creating 10 new annual conferences that really inflamed the South, particularly Southern Methodists, and led to the charge of ecclesiastical carpetbagging. We'll talk about the Freedmen's Aid Society in a second section, but the North, with Simpson's support of Lincoln, propelled Methodism really to a national status after the war. The Southern Methodist Church, as we indicated, from 1858, on the eve of the Civil War, had struck down any prohibitions against slavery from the general rules, but the South had really come to see the destruction of the war, which led to a loss of 1/3 of its membership, as really a judgment upon the South in general, and not so much a judgment upon slavery. It was more of a moral judgment. After the Civil War, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, which had lost 250,000 members, began to reflect on its future. At the start of the Civil War, the Southern Methodist Church had 757 total members, 2/3 Caucasian, 1/3 slaves. At the end of the war, there was roughly 500,000 total members. Most of the churches were destroyed. The General Conference of 1862 in New Orleans was incapable of meeting. Most of the annual conferences were unable to be met. The bishops were unable to travel. And after the Emancipation Proclamation, most African American members, about 200,000 plus, almost 200,000 after the freedom granted by the Emancipation Proclamation, began to gravitate and leave the Methodist Episcopal Church South and adhere to the AME and the AME Zion Church, which came to the South. The remaining members of Southern Methodist Church in 1870 petitioned the MEC South for independence and formed the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, the CME, which today is called the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. You can see here that Southern Methodists supported the ordination, the consecration of William Henry Miles as the first bishop of the CME. So when you see the CME today, which is now the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church from the 50s, these are the Southern Methodist freed descendants of the Southern Methodist Church from 1870, formed in Jackson, Tennessee.